1998 Year in Review is brought to you by Airbus.
In central Jakarta, in front of Trisakti University, the police have cordoned off the area. The police and the army, they're firing bullets into the air, probably rubber bullets. It's a state of confusion here.
We still got a very tense situation because of combination of funeral services today for students that were shot dead yesterday, and new rallies, and groups have split off in different directions. There have been quite a few vehicles burned in the area. There was some shooting.
It doesn't sound like it's just students anymore. Would it be fair to say the situation is approaching near anarchy?
That is the case, yeah. It's almost total chaos here, and a lot of people are afraid to go out onto the streets.
In May this year, 2 weeks of unrest and rioting rocked Indonesia. It led to the fall of a president who'd been in power for 3 decades. Hello and welcome to this special year-end review of Indonesia 98. Over the next half hour, we'll be taking a look back at those events that shocked not just Asia, but many around the world. The trigger for the unrest, the shootings of several students here at Trisakti University.
It was a demonstration at one of Indonesia's top private universities that turned deadly. But earlier in the day, it had all been very different. The mood, good-natured. But then the students moved out onto the streets from their campus in West Jakarta. The tension was palpable. Even so, the students were trying to win friends among the police. The protesters pushed forward, testing police resolve. The students want political reform, and they're not going to give up easily. One newspaper editorial says, no speedy end can be expected to nationwide protests. The student protests are expected to intensify next week. Analysts say the government's caught between a rock and a hard place. While it's talking about political reform, it doesn't want to be seen to be caving in to the students' demands. The aim of the students, bring down Suharto. And it's a call that has struck a chord with many here. And that has the army worried.
If you talk to insiders in the military, they're very concerned about the situation. They would certainly like to contain any possible violence, but at this point they feel their backs are against the wall. Don't forget, the military has long-term vested interests in running this country, and if they were to step down hard on the students, their credibility as well would suffer, not just Suharto's.
Perhaps they've already crossed the line. But there's no doubt in many people's minds that the military will play a key role in Indonesia's political future. However, some believe the army may prefer a civilian to take over the reins from Suharto, rather than one of its own.
Well, at this point, I don't think the military would like to have one of their men step out to the front stage. Their main concern is that if this military man becomes the next president, they receive extreme criticism from overseas. And number two, it wouldn't carry a lot of credence with the Indonesians as well.
And according to this man, a former finance minister, it all comes down to credibility and confidence.
The next 3 months is very critical. The acceptance of people of this kind of social distress. Can they accept it? They can only accept it if there is hope. And the hope is coming from the political, not from the economical.
Many believe Indonesia will have to implement political reforms, and a major overhaul of the system may be needed. The students are likely to keep the pressure on until the authorities give a clear indication that they do take their demands seriously.
The rioting and looting have left their scars here, not just in terms of gutted buildings like these, but also psychologically. Hundreds of people died in the fires, mainly looters trapped in burning buildings. But there were also brutal attacks on the ethnic Chinese community, including rapes. At the time of the rioting, a state of anarchy, the security forces nowhere to be seen.
More protests around the capital and more violence too. A looting spree in a shopping district in Jakarta, and looters don't take kindly to TV cameras. Coincidence perhaps, but this says it all. Jakarta is becoming increasingly lawless and dangerous. It's the morning after, and these are the scars left by the rioting and looting. This petrol station an obvious target as anger mounts over fuel price increases. Across the road at Trisakti University, around the campus, wreaths for the students gunned down. A former Supreme Court justice, who's now a dean of the law faculty at the university, says the protests will continue until President Suharto goes. A report in the Jakarta Post says President Suharto has indicated he may be ready to step down. But there are some doubts about his intentions.
As the protests spread across the city, so too does the violence. But the protesters say only one thing will defuse the situation, and that's for President Suharto to step down.
Amid growing calls for the president to step down, and with the anarchy and violence still fresh in people's minds, many try to get out of the capital. Some to other parts of Indonesia, such as Bali. Others left for the likes of Hong Kong and Singapore.
Singapore Airlines flights departing Jakarta from now till Monday, 18th May 1998 are already fully booked.
Airlines are jammed full, carrying people desperate to escape riot-torn Jakarta.
From the office that I work, we can see smokes, plums everywhere. Almost 360 degrees, you can see smokes. And people demonstrate on the street. So, I guess I have to do something for my family.
It's just like war,
People arrived at Singapore's Changi Airport after long journeys and delays.
We left pretty early in the morning.
He didn't suggest the driver to speed up when there was a bunch of people like waving us and flagging us down to stop. I think we would have been in trouble then, because they probably would have asked to get out of the car, and we probably wouldn't be here, or probably with a lot less stuff.
We just decided, okay, we have to go to the airport. We don't have any tickets, we don't have any seat confirmed. We just go to the airport and wait there. And luckily, we can get on the plane within 10 hours waiting in the airport.
Some family members waited just as long. This man waited from morning till evening.
They are not confirmed yet, so I have to make sure they get on the earlier flights possible.
Finally, they came. For those who can leave, relief. For those who cannot, uncertainty and fear.
After the break, the fall of a president in power for more than 30 years. President Suharto had been on an official trip to Egypt at the start of the rioting. When he returned, the political wrangling intensified, and it quickly became clear he had lost the support of even those closest to him. In short, Suharto's time was up.
Calm's restored to the streets of Jakarta in time for Friday prayers. A trail of destruction from the looting throughout Jakarta and its suburbs. Here it's reported around 200 bodies were found, the building set alight by looters while others were inside. The army's in evidence around the city, and the lid's been put back on the violence, at least for now.
It's bad, yeah? But I mean, not that bad that you need a martial law. Martial law is a kind of little bit if you are in a very extreme situation.
Much depends on how the government handles the situation, and indications are it will cancel fuel price increases. They've been part of the IMF deal, but are a source of anger here. The army maintains it's got the situation here under control. Many fear a crackdown. But that said, the violence could quickly erupt again.
The anti-government protests continued unabated, with tens of thousands gathering here at Parliament. The president had reportedly offered to step down, but would he? This was the eye of the storm.
The student protest was peaceful enough, but then came the order and the troops prepared to open fire. A tense moment, but then almost as unexpectedly, the soldiers lowered their guns. The standoff came after this banner was raised, calling for members of parliament to step down. Muslim scholar Amin Rai is riding high outside parliament. He's one of many here who think it's time President Suharto should quit.
I will give once again a very strong message to him that Mr. Suharto, your people do not trust you any longer. So what is the use of holding power so stubbornly?
The students clearly in a boisterous mood. They're chanting provocative. They have little or no respect left for the father of the nation and his family.
Indonesia's battle-scarred capital has begun struggling back to normal after a weekend of relative calm. But Jakarta remains tense as the nation awaits the next move by President Suharto or his opponents.
It may be the calm between the storms, some semblance of normality returning to Jakarta. But throughout the city and its suburbs, a trail of destruction. Block after block of businesses in ruins. Those that survived, the ones owned by indigenous Indonesians. Businesses built up by ethnic Chinese are being destroyed. The scale of the destruction is immense, and the cost of the damage is already estimated to be well into the hundreds of billions of rupiah. It's going to be many years before the capital, Jakarta, gets back to what it was, especially as foreign investors and ethnic Chinese won't be rushing back in anytime soon. From banks to department stores, discos to fast food outlets, they've all been hit by looting and rioting.
I've been trying to think myself, what city of significance in the world in the last 50 years has experienced something this other than in the middle of a war? And I can't think of any.
Some businesses linked to the Suharto family appear to have been singled out. Others still unscathed. But it's clear many here are directing their anger and frustration at President Suharto. This week's likely to be a crucial one, with the stakes being raised. Confidence is already taken a battering, and unless something is done soon, it won't just be shops that will be in ruins, the economy will be as well.
Indonesia's banks reopened in the aftermath of the violent protests. In Jakarta, that brought long lines as customers queued up to get much-needed cash.
Long queues were forming in many of Jakarta's biggest banks just minutes after the doors opened. For many of these people, it was the first chance to get cash since Thursday, when violent protests forced banks to close nationwide. Indonesia's central bank, Bank Negara, was prepared.
Bank Indonesia already injected money to around 100 trillion rupiah to the system. And then with this today, people started taking up their money from the bank. I think they will have to invest more.
Here in this central Jakarta bank, the queues have been growing minute by minute. Most people are taking out the maximum allowable 5 million rupiah. That's about $500 US. And most of that money is going to be spent just on food. Food prices are rising sharply in Jakarta as supply lines fail and stocks dwindle. But not all banks were facing such severe demand. Bank Central Asia, Indonesia's biggest retail bank, is part owned by Chinese interests and part owned by one of President Suharto's daughters. It drew big queues. But 100 metres down the road at a Lippo Bank branch, conditions were much quieter. Analysts say the government is prepared to do anything to keep the banks operating.
So far, they can support the system, and I think, like it or not, they have to continue to do that. Otherwise, the collapse of the banking system, it will create also the collapse of the economy. I think central banks at any cost will try to support the system.
But with no end in sight to the political troubles in Indonesia, the banking system will remain under severe pressure.
Coming up, a new president, but the protests continue. That's after the break. Then the beginning of the end for President Suharto, Asia's longest-serving leader. He said he'd be bowing out, promising fresh elections to find a successor.
A festival of democracy. The students in Indonesia are apparently achieving what their counterparts in China and Myanmar have failed to bring about: political change. It wasn't all happiness, though. Pro-government forces had gate-crashed the party. But when President Suharto eventually made his television address, telling the nation he would be going, but at a date he'd decide on later, the students knew they'd won, even though they were still chanting for Suharto to go. With government supporters gone, the celebrations proper could begin.
Very happy.
Very happy.
Very happy. About the re-election and the 7th cabinet will be finished. Yeah, my reaction, excited.
Abdurrahman Waid, who heads an organization representing an estimated 35 million Muslims, says President Suharto may be hoping the protests will now fizzle out.
Well, I think the mass protests will subside after a little while, and then the military will continue, because Indonesians are not known for, fighting very long time.
The military has given its backing to the president, but it seems for now, people power has won the day.
The celebrations are already underway here, although it remains to be seen just how long it will be before the president does step down. The students, though, saying they'll be keeping the pressure on, at least for now.
In the end, events moved rapidly. Suharto did step down, and a new president, Indonesia's third, was quickly sworn in.
Bakhruddin Yusuf Habibie is the new president of Indonesia.
Demi Allah.
By God, I swear that I will fulfill my duties as the President of Indonesia as best as I can and as fair as is possible.
Dan seadil-adilnya.
Habibie was sworn in at the presidential palace this morning after President Suharto, in a stunning move, announced his resignation after 32 years in power.
I have decided to declare that I have ceased to be the President of the Republic of Indonesia as of the moment I read this statement. This resignation has been agreed by all parties. Bakhruddin Yusuf Habibie will serve you as the President until the year 2003.
After 32 years in power, the end came quickly. A stunned nation listened as President Suharto handed over the reins of power. For the students, the driving force for political change in Indonesia, scenes of uncontained joy. For 4 days, they have occupied Indonesia's Parliament Square in the heart of Jakarta, demanding that the president step down. They said they would stay until he went. As the world watched the standoff, the students held firm. It was the president who backed down.
For now, the celebrations are continuing. People power has won an historic victory in Indonesia. But for the students, it still may not be enough. They want to see a complete change to the political system, not just the people.
The other goals is our country became democratic and stable.
We don't want the regime of Suharto will be still in the new government, in the new reformation.
For the students, the taste of political power has strengthened their resolve. And even though they may not be completely happy, for now they have achieved one of their chief aims, to remove the man they blame for plunging their country into economic chaos and political corruption.
Indonesia's new president, B.J. Habibie, announced his new cabinet, representing what he described as a broad cross-section of the political spectrum in the country. Habibie named 36 ministers to what he called a reform and development cabinet just a few hours ago on national television. Habibie retained Ali Alatas as foreign minister, Ginandar Kartasasmita as economics minister, and Bambang Subianto as finance minister.
The weakest link in President Habibie's new reform cabinet is the president himself. Even though he dumped high-profile Suharto family members and friends, like the former president's first daughter, as well as his golfing partner, the Suharto factor remains.
Habibie has been Suharto's close protege. In fact, in Suharto book, Suharto mentioned that Habibie is like my foster son.
That appears to be the key sticking point in this new cabinet. Apart from that, experts say the new president has chosen well.
For the time being, I think so, because I don't know every one of them. But some of them, I think, are good professionals. Yes. So at least in comparison with the previous cabinet, I think this is a lot better.
But Habibie's critics are many, his most unforgiving, the students.
At Parliament Square in the heart of Jakarta, thousands were again calling for heads to roll, this time Habibie. They want him out because of his links to Suharto. The Habibie succession is dividing the students in Indonesia. Pro-Habibie forces are now marching on Parliament Square to express their opinion that Habibie should stay under the Constitution. The standoff weakens the students' push and underlines the growing belief that student power may be on the wane. Analysts say it's unlikely the students will claim the downfall of a second president in Indonesia. But Habibie and his new cabinet have been put on notice by all opposition parties. They are giving him at least 6 months to show that he can rescue Indonesia, both economically and politically. But that, say experts, is unlikely. Whichever way he turns, President Habibie finds himself facing a fight just to survive.
Well, we go to Jakarta Live now for our continuing coverage of the historic events unfolding in the Indonesian capital now. We're talking to Stuart Pallister, one of our correspondents on the ground there, who's been covering the story for the last few weeks. Stuart, thanks for joining us. Quickly, what is the reaction so far to President Habibie's first cabinet?
Well, I've been speaking to several analysts, people who are watching the speech, and essentially it seems to be a mixed bag regarding the reaction. Some analysts are quite unhappy with what President Habibie has come up with.
Undang-undang dasar.
Many have their reservations about whether the new cabinet's up to the task ahead. Some, though, are prepared to give the new regime a chance, at least for now. Muslim leader Amin Rais has been quoted as saying he'll give Habibie's government 6 months.
Perjuangan rakyat Indonesia.
The students who've been spearheading the drive for political reform are also taking a wait-and-see approach. Late Friday night, hundreds of soldiers move in to clear protesters from the grounds of the Parliament building. The operation, well planned and largely without violence. Questions remain as to whether the students have the resolve to press on with their fight for reform, now that Suharto has gone. But as the students were bussed out of the Parliament compound, they clearly felt they'd won a victory.
But the political turmoil is far from over. Recently, students returned to the streets demanding change. Here, some were gunned down by security forces. As the Indonesian government seeks to bring some stability back to the country, the question remains, will it be able to do so quickly enough? Or is there a danger we'll see a repeat of what happened back in May? Well, that's it for this special year-end review of Indonesia '98. Thanks for watching.
'98 Year in Review was brought to you by Airbus.